So, Dom, this past week you got back from a trip from Taiwan where you got to meet with the CEO and management team for a company. Tell us a little bit about how that started.
Yeah. So the company I went out to see is called FST Corp. That's the parent company, and they manufacture KBS golf shafts. So if you own like a TaylorMade iron set, and you bought it off like a Dick's Sporting Goods or Golf Galaxy rack, most likely they're going to have a KBS golf shaft in it. So I flew out to Taipei, Taiwan, and then took about a 2-hour drive to their manufacturing city called Jiayi, where they have their facility. It's undergone some expansions recently. So the whole purpose of the trip was to gain a better understanding of how steel golf shafts are made. And given our position in Callaway Golf, I thought it was just a really good opportunity to learn a little more about the golf industry, see what their management team was saying about the outlook, new entrants into the games, things like that.
When did you first meet KBS or hear about KBS?
Yeah, so as a golfer, I've known of the shaft, but I did not realize they were public until we were doing our due diligence on Callaway Golf. So they were at a conference I went to, I believe, over the summer, and met with their CFO and head of IR, had a really good conversation, then had a follow-up meeting towards December with the same individuals, and then thereafter just stayed in contact, and then received a call, asked me to come out and to their facilities.
Yeah, I mean, what a cool opportunity. And you were over there for about a week. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and on top of getting to know the process, the other benefit was went out there a couple days early, and I've never been to Asia, and we have a great investment mandate where we are able to go geographic anywhere we want, market cap basically up and down the spectrum. And so I don't really know much about the Asian culture. And one of my big fears when we invest abroad is always, is there something that I am not going to know about that a local would know? And I think it was beneficial to at least see some of the cultural differences, uh, and just understand a little more about, what we take for granted in the US versus, what goes over, at least in Taiwan.
So you meet the team at KBS. They offer for you to go out there. You're there for around a week. What are you doing while you're there?
Yeah, so we met up with the management team on Tuesday, drove down to their manufacturing facility. We got dinner with the CEO, basically the head of the plant, and an individual from the research and development team. We got dinner with them. It was just a really good opportunity to chat with them, see what their initiatives are, talk with the CEO about different like capital allocation priorities, what they're seeing in the industry, any headwinds, tailwinds, just what are their focuses on. And when we got to the facility on Wednesday, the first thing we did was go to the I'm gonna say original company. Their parent or founding company is called Femco Steel. They started off in basically like the yo-yo child's toy business. Then they graduated to bicycle wheel spokes. Today they manufacture like large industrial grade steel pipes that you might see in like infrastructure projects. And then like an offshoot of it is FST Corp, where they manufacture the KBS shafts. So their origin story is basically on anything that's like a round tube of sorts, whether it's bicycle spoke, industrial tubing, and now a steel shaft that's essentially a steel tube. So we got to tour the Femco History Museum. They've been around for about 75 years now. They celebrated their 70-year anniversary. They have a museum basically set up where it just walks you through the history of the company, and it was great to see that. We then toured their manufacturing facility where they make the tubes. And then from there, we went over to the KBS manufacturing facility. Basically, got to walk the entire manufacturing floor, see start to finish of, hey, they have a steel roll come in. How does that get turned into a golf shaft? And we got to just watch it go through the 20 to 25 step process that it felt like it went through. ask some questions about the facility and the process. Like as a golfer, there's different types of shafts. One is called like a stepped shaft, where if you take what most tour pros play and probably what most golfers play is when you look at the golf shaft, there's like little, I don't want to call them indentations, but they're called steps. As this shaft goes from like large, where you hold the club, smaller, down towards where the head is. It's called like a step shaft. Versus they have one that's like a non-step shaft. That's basically just like a symmetrical steel tube all the way around. Good to know why one steel shaft is made a certain way versus another. They also manufacture putting or putter shafts. Those are in tailor-made putters, and those should be pretty popular on the tour. So got to see how basically like the steel tube is bent towards the neck of a putter, and then got to see just like the final quality assurance, different tests that they run on the shafts to ensure that the shaft in my 7-iron is going to be identical to the shaft that your 7-iron is going to be. Just because when like the margin for error is so small in golf, just any sort of imperfection is going to throw off like spin rate, height of the apex of the ball, contact, things like that. So um, it was much more detailed than I would have thought. And it was really good to understand just like the different chemicals, equipment used in the entire process.
Absolutely. I mean, that's pretty good behind the scenes look there. How big of a player are they in the shaft market?
Yeah, so there's two main players. It's True Temper and KBS. They have about 40% each. The numbers aren't actually disclosed. True Temper is a private company. They estimate somewhere around 40% each market share. And then the third player, I believe, is like Nippon Steel, and I think they have somewhere around 17%. And what's interesting and what I think needs I need to do more research on is KBS has 1.2 million shafts per month of capacity, and True Temper is private, so you don't know what the exact facility capacity is. It's in Mississippi. The management team believes that it's around 3 million shafts per month. I think it historically might have been closer to 1.5 million. I think that number may vary depending on number of shifts that they run at any given time. But the overall demand for steel shafts per month is around, I believe it's around 2 million shafts. And so, how does True Temper, who has about 1.5 million shafts per month, up to 3 million shafts per month, and KBS, who has 1.2 million shafts per month of capacity. So on the low end, that's 2.7 million shafts in a month. Market demand is 2 million, and that's still leaving 20% of the market. How do these businesses basically make money in what is an oligopoly, basically, of a steel market, but yet the capacity utilization of these companies are relatively low compared to where they need to be to make some sort of economic profit? For these companies, they got to be somewhere around 75, 80% to make some like good ROIs on the investments. Because these are heavy industry machines. There's some CapEx that's involved on a yearly basis to maintain the machines. So how at 2 million shafts a month of demand versus the capacity that's well north of that, how do they, coexist, and what's the path towards higher utilization?
You talked about getting dinner with someone on the R&D team. Obviously, AI is a big focus with manufacturers just looking for cheaper, being able to manufacture these products cheaper. Is that a focus for KBS in 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, I one of the questions I asked them, I go, you in their S1 when they came public via a SPAC, they roughly outlined the process of manufacturing a shaft. And I go, have you guys ever said, hey, here's our process, like ChatGPT, like what do I need to buy? What would you do to improve this? They said that they had not looked into it, but they are looking into ways to automate more of the day-to-day processes. When we were there, there's a machine called a swaging machine. I won't get into what it does, but it right now uh, the machine takes about 5 to 6 individuals to operate. Last year, they brought in a machine that basically takes one, maybe no individuals to operate on a daily basis. And so in the facility, they have 6 of these swaging machines. One of them's automated, 5 of them are manual. They're looking to bring in more automated, the remaining 5, and then can retrain or reduce costs at the facility. So I think they absolutely are looking at ways to either use AI or use some sort of automation to improve the efficiency of the operation. When I looked at a video by True Temper and what their manufacturing facility looked like, it seemed like their facility is a little more automated than what KBS has. And I think it kind of has to be because KBS, they manufacture in Taiwan. They have a really good advantage on the logistics and cost side, where the employees do not obviously cost as much as somebody who lives in Mississippi, and so they also have a logistics advantage where they ship all of their shafts basically to Vietnam, where the golf clubs get assembled, versus True Temper, who ships their shafts from Mississippi to Vietnam and then has to go back to the US to get delivery. So there's a shipping advantage that KBS has. So how if KBS has cheaper labor plus shorter logistics, how do they not significantly beat True Temper on the cost side? And I think the answer has to be that True Temper's facilities are a little more advanced on the manufacturing processes to be able to compete with KBS.
I read your report after you'd returned, and one of the things that you mentioned that I thought was super interesting was the shift from low irons to fairway woods and hybrids. Golfers out there probably may notice this as well. How does this affect a company like KBS when they
Yeah,
primarily operate with the steel shafts?
yeah, it's crazy. The number of friends I play with that say I cannot hit my 4 iron, it like goes up every year, it feels like. And so historically a golf bag was like a 4 iron through a pitching wedge, and then you would have like a driver, 3 wood and 5 wood at a putter and maybe a wedge or two to get to 14 clubs in a bag. Today, if you look at what tour pros are playing and what I'm gonna say more amateurs are playing and maybe older people, a lot of people are just like not comfortable hitting a 4 iron. It's harder to hit. And so instead of a 4 iron, they may be adding a 4 hybrid or like a 7 wood basically into the bag, take out the 4 iron. And that would reduce on the one end the number of steel shafts that are in a bag, because now you're going from a 4 iron to a pitching wedge to a 5 iron to a pitching wedge. So just one less steel shaft. And in place, you're adding a graphite shaft. Um, the other thing that's also happened on the flip side is we're now seeing more wedges in a bag. So maybe historically you have a pitching wedge and then like a 52-degree and a 56-degree wedge, something like that. Today, almost everybody has three wedges in their bag. These are all steel shaft, and in some cases you'll see 4 wedges in a bag, depending on what course you're playing or where you're playing. It wouldn't surprise me, like for the PGA Tour pros when they go over to Europe for like the Open Championship, if they add an extra wedge in the bag because it's so dry over there that the distance isn't really what they're looking for. It's more around the green. How can they just better manipulate different shafts and different bounces on the clubs? So KBS has, I'm going to say, on the margin, a slight headwind in that more bags have one more graphite shaft in them versus a steel shaft. And the real negative on that is KBS today, 95% of their revenue is steel shaft and 5% of it is a graphite shaft. When they are going out to bid an iron set that has a 5-through pitching wedge as a steel shaft, but then like a 3 and a 4 hybrid that's a graphite shaft. It is very tough for KBS to compete with that because they would say, yeah, we can supply your 5 to pitching wedge iron, but that 3 and 4 hybrid, you're going to have to go over to True Temper and ask them to get a quote for that. And you typically don't see manufacturers mix and match shafts. I don't know anyone that has a KBS, 3 and 4 hybrid, but then a True Temper steel shaft in their bag. It's typically uniform across the bag. KBS's like big push today is 5% of their business is graphite shafts. They don't manufacture the graphite shafts. They just have the R&D, the IP behind it, and they outsource the manufacturing of it. Their big push today is how can they grow their graphite shaft business from 5% to some higher number. And the fact that they're now in the graphite shaft market, like a Jason Day plays their driver, I believe 3-wood, 5-wood, and basically across the board, their shafts. So they're trying to get more of a presence in the graphite shaft market. And that is basically going to be their big growth engine. I would say over the next 5+ years is growing that 5% to some higher number. And the fact that they have the graphite shaft business now should allow them to compete more on new bids for irons that have hybrids in their side.
You had behind the scenes look, you got to pick some brains of experts in the field. How does, that week you spent doing that, does that impact our ownership in Callaway?
Yeah, so the whole impetus for it is our goal is to find differentiated ideas, and then while we hold a position, how can we find edges that will allow us to see something that the market might be missing. So, for example, I may take this trip because I'm going to learn something about the steel shaft market and the downstream effects of certain events may end up affecting Callaway's business. So, for example, the war that's going on right now is causing supply issues for certain materials. And what I learned over there is that they use plastic a lot in the end process to protect the shafts when they ship them. And so plastics is a byproduct of refining oil. You've got refineries going offline. You've got less oil being able to ship through the strait. So what doesn't really seem like that big of an issue, you've got higher oil prices, higher gas prices. That's going to affect the transportation side. But you learn that actually, plastic is an important part of the process. And if there's no plastic, then they have to find ways to protect the steel shafts in some other way. And if everybody starts doing this all at once, well, then it may result in a supply issue where they can't get enough, whatever it is, paper or some other cardboard, just something else to protect it. And maybe that leads to less shafts being able to be produced. And if less shafts are able to be produced, then that probably means less Callaway golf clubs can get produced. And so if less Callaway golf clubs can get produced, that means Callaway sales are going to be lower than what we would have anticipated. So it's all about building a knowledge base of what are the different components, supply, customers, demand. Again, just build a picture and a better knowledge base of what the end-to-end process is. And when certain events occur, hopefully we are now better equipped to answer questions on will this affect our company or not.
Yeah, beautiful. I appreciate the thoroughness of your research. And I mean, we're talking about 24 hours of round trip time at least on that plane ride. So, I appreciate the lengths that you are willing to go to on the research side. And yeah, thanks for your time today, Dom.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kellan.